Hello and welcome to my second video on the nature of depth therapy and neuropsychoanalysis to help you further understand how this knowledge is the missing link in giving you the confidence and the skill to build a healthy relationship life. So again, depth therapy is based on the notion that we all have an unconscious mind, and a really important principle here is that the mark of strength and flexibility in the personality is the relationship between the conscious and the unconscious mind. So again, we all have conscious minds, we all have an unconscious part of our mind, and the mark of somebody with a sturdy but flexible, capable personality, there's a strong relationship between the conscious and the unconscious. Now that's easy to say, but it can be tricky to actually establish that relationship, which is where the help of a professional or some really good education and self-reflection can come in very handy. What I'd like to talk a little bit more about here is the most exciting research that science and psychology have come together and put together over the last 20 years or so, actually based on the research of John Bowlby, who was a psychoanalyst in the 1960s. And his work and insights have really come through and been validated and revalidated and understood more deeply over the last 20 years. And those understandings have been integrated into the field we call neuropsychoanalysis. And that is the influence of the relationship between the knowledge we have about bonds and how bonds, or attachment relationships, both rewire the brain in our development. They literally tell the brain what to expect and what connections are made, and how those bonds also rewire the relationship in our adult life. So I'm going to get more into that in a minute, but that's really the secret to developing in your adult life. So our conscious mind, again, as you know, is made up of all the things that are directly accessible to your memory, your awareness, what's in front of you, conversations you had today, what you just did. And obviously there's the subconscious, which are things that are just slightly out of reach of your conscious mind, but can be very easily recalled. What you did earlier today, for instance, or last week. The unconscious mind is material that we don't need. You don't need to access things that happened a long time ago, perhaps before memory laid down stories in our brain the way it does as an adult. And most importantly, what resides mostly in our unconscious mind is what we call the blueprints or working models. And that is the result of our attachment relationships, again, our early bonds, the patterns that we perceived in those relationships we internalize as a working model or a blueprint. And these blueprints are very important because our minds are programmed to predict what we are going to find in the world. And those predictions help us organize the data that we encounter in the world. And this makes our minds incredibly efficient. And we couldn't function normally in the world without the efficiency of these models or blueprints. So again, these models and blueprints that we all have and that reside mostly in our unconscious mind were built on our early attachment relationships. So obviously the problem with that is not all of our early attachment relationships were entirely healthy. And even if they were more or less healthy, there's often misconceptions that we acquired in those early experiences. So therefore, we're left with blueprints that are not good at teaching us how to predict healthy relationships. We end up screening out some information that we need and not even picking up on it, and or being attracted to repeating the patterns of our childhood even though we do not wish to do so. So depth therapy is the practice of psychology that works to bring these working models into our direct conscious awareness. And from there we can modify these blueprints to be really accurately reflective of our adult understandings, our life goals, our value systems, and our beliefs. So how do we do that? As I said in the previous video, the depth therapist is somebody who's trained to watch the subtle cues, the questions, the worries, the concerns, and the behaviors, and the patterns. It's very important, the patterns that come up in the therapeutic relationship in combination with the knowledge of the patient's history, their current life experience, any patterns that seem to repeat in relationship. And with all of that data, we get to see very clearly what the working model is and how it is in action. So both the patient and the therapist can see that in action. And at that point, my patients usually say, aha, I get it. I see where that came from. That makes sense. It's nobody's fault. But that's not what I want. It's not what I meant. It's not what I believe. And it's certainly not what I want to repeat going forward. And at that point, really the bulk of the work has been done. And from there, it's a relatively more simple part of the process to replace these unconscious old beliefs with new beliefs that are more aligned with the person's life goals and value systems and beliefs, and an adult understanding of what compromises healthy relationships. Now, the trick here is many people will try to skip over the first step and try to implement adult, healthy, reasonable, rational beliefs into their relationship life. And I can guarantee this does not work. I've seen it over and over. And this is, again, why depth therapy is the missing link to help people implement the relationship ideals they may know with their conscious mind are perfectly healthy and reasonable, but why you cannot implement them without doing the first step of understanding your own unconscious working models and where they came from. So this, again, is why I believe depth therapy is the missing link in the education of relationship wellness and the foundation of building healthy relationships. Neuropsychoanalysis maximizes the scientific knowledge of relationships and how they work to make the best use of the therapeutic action, so that, again, new working models are created in a way that's integrated in experience, because you have an actual experience of a relationship with your therapist. So those working models are not ideas, they're actually a new experience that you have. And this can also happen in a great healthy relationship, a parent, a mentor, a love relationship, friendships, all contribute to this as well. But therapeutic is a greatly refined and controlled way of getting to look very deeply into your own personal experience and work on this in a very unique way. And the result of this work is to create feelings of safety and security, as well as the freedom to be who you are, express yourself fully, and to feel fully alive. And that is the quality of a secure relationship or a secure attachment. Again, that unique combination of security and freedom and aliveness. If you're not familiar with the principles of a secure attachment, they are essentially, first, the capacity to know your own feeling states and perceptions. And this is often where a lot of personal work or therapy comes into place, because you need to have the skill to understand your feeling states, not just I feel bad, but what are the particular feelings and where do they particularly come from. Because from there, we can learn to have the second skill, which is to differentiate another person's feelings or perceptions. Because in a relationship, it often gets tricky and both people's feelings are very strong or confused. You need to be able to differentiate your own feelings from that of someone else. And from there, we build the third capacity to express your feelings and your needs respectfully yet clearly, utilizing good boundaries. And the fourth capacity to hear another person accurately without getting triggered by your own emotional response. From those four basic capacities is the fifth capacity, where both people are working together to track the relationship. So in a healthy, secure attachment, both people are constantly, not in an irritating way, but kind of naturally tracking. They're aware of the other person's feeling states and the aliveness of the connection. So if there's a disruption or something was misunderstood, both people tend to pick up on that fairly quickly and work with care and consideration to resolve that. And that's how attachments that are secure stay stable and secure and healthy. So at this point, you can ask yourself if you had these qualities in your early bonds. Is this the way your early bonds function? If you did, you're very fortunate, and you can build on that to have a really clear idea of what that looks like in your adult relationships, particularly love relationships, but it's also the foundation of healthy parenting. And a psychoanalyst, especially who is very versed in neuropsychoanalysis and attachment, is someone who's trained to work with a therapeutic relationship to help you redo these working models and form healthy assumptions and skills going forward. So if this has been interesting to you, I invite you to please check out my next and third video, which will explain to you my 4-module course, which will be designed to walk you through in great detail everything we've covered very briefly here. Understanding bits about your own past, your relationship patterns, and really from there working to have all the skills and confidence you need to build healthy relationships in your adult life. Thank you, and please join me there.